Andrew, thanks. Joining us right now to talk more about both presidential candidates' tax plans and strategies is Ben Harris. He served as chief economist to Vice President Biden. And Mattie Duppler, who is National Taxpayers Union Senior Fellow. Welcome to both of you. A lot to talk about here, but Ben, we'll start with you. It's definitely not the largest tax increase in history, but it's a big tax increase at a time when the economy's been suffering because of COVID. How do you raise taxes when there's already so much pressure on the economy?
So two things. The first is this is not just a tax increase. It's also a tax cut. So for people making less than $400,000 a year, the Tax Policy Center says it'll cut their taxes by about $1,000 on average, $15,000 for first-time home buyers, $8,000 towards child care. So it's not just a tax increase. It is truly a tax reform. It gives a lot of people a tax cut. The second thing to remember is that this is designed to pay for these long-term investments, many of which are pro-business, things like improved infrastructure, $400 billion for research and development, closing the digital divide. These are things that are good for businesses that grow the economy. So again, it's not just a tax increase for the sake of raising taxes. It's a tax increase to pay for investments.
Mattie, what do you say to that? It's not just a tax increase, but a tax redistribution. What does that mean for the economy as far as you're concerned?
Well, I think there are a number of things with the Biden tax proposals that have been confused in this conversation over the last several months. First, Biden is proposing tax increases that would hit people making less than $400,000. He said repeatedly he wants to bring the individual mandate tax back, 80% of which hits folks who make less than $50,000 a year. On top of that, changes to Social Security, those taxable maxes on wages that would rise over time, that would eventually eat up more and more income for folks making less than $400,000 a year. But I do think that these tax hikes that the Biden campaign is proposing on businesses are the most worrisome, particularly in an environment right now that is so uncertain. We just got a huge Q3 GDP print. We do not have the assurances that Q4 and Q1 of 2021 are going to look as strong as the summer did in the American economy. And this would be a huge departure from where Vice President Biden was and President Obama were in 2008, 2009. President Obama repeatedly said you don't raise taxes in a recession. And going into the uncertainty of this winter, what businesses need in the United States is more certainty, particularly on the tax side. So raising the corporate tax rate, raising the top marginal rates where most business income reports its taxes, that would be extremely harmful in this very uncertain environment.
Yeah, Ben, that's a fair point. You think these tax increases would go in place right away?
So the vice president has said that he wants to put the corporate tax increase, which would take the rate from 21% up to 28%, which is the way still lower than it was from the late 1980s until 2017. He wants to put that in place soon. But the point here is that, look, you can look at independent analysis, and I agree with the comment that our economy is really hurting and we need bold action. You can look at analysis coming out of Moody's, coming out of Wharton. Wharton, President Trump's alma mater, found the Biden plan would grow the economy by $1 trillion over the first term, more than Trump's plan. So, yeah, no, I agree the economy is hurting, that we need a plan to get it back on track.
But that doesn't get to the heart of the matter. If you raise taxes on businesses while the economy is hurting, what does that do to business income, and what does that do to the revenue that the Treasury Department's going to take in?
Yeah, I mean, so again, this is not taxing just the tax. This is taxing to put in place this massive infrastructure plan. It'll add 18.6 million jobs. The vice president wants to add $400 billion in procurement for American manufacturers. So this is not taxing just the tax. The idea is, look, we want to grow the economy. We want a pro-business plan here. But he doesn't want to leave huge deficits in his wake. So it does raise the corporate tax, again, well below its historical levels, but it uses the revenue from that for investments that will grow the economy.
Ben, that sounds so great, but why don't we just keep raising taxes, raise them and raise them and raise them, get more and more and more jobs and more, and just keep doing it if that really does happen the way you – I mean, you really believe what you're saying? That so the higher the taxes, the more jobs that we create.
Yeah, I mean, that's not really a fair comment. I mean, this is not a slippery slope. No one's arguing for 70% tax rates. No one's arguing even for 50% tax rates.
So just the right amount. Just the right amount will add all these jobs.
Yeah, so look at Wharton's analysis. So between people making $400,000, $800,000, their taxes would go from 28% on average to 28.5%. That is not a huge tax increase, and that's well worth the investments we're making.
We're talking about businesses mostly, and how is it that that's going to cause businesses to actually hire more people by raising their tax? You have historical precedents for that, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, you guys just pointed out that this would bring us back to the late 90s, which was a terrific period for growth, far better than we've seen for the past 4 years. Businesses don't just invest. We talk to business leaders all the time. It's not just about taxes. They want to see investment in research. They want customers who can go ahead and buy their goods. They want people who can go out in the economy. They want workers who feel safe being in the workplace. So it's not just about taxes. It's about a healthy economy. It's about a balanced economy. And that's what this plan aims to do.
Hey, Mattie, what about the argument for spending on infrastructure? That is something that both sides of the aisle have been saying they want for a long time.
That's right. Remember, it's always infrastructure week. But, the challenge that Vice President Biden has with his plan is that, I think Robert Frank said about $5 trillion in new spending. Our analysis at the National Taxpayers Union is that it's actually much higher than that. It's probably $1.3 trillion in new spending every single year. The tax plan that Biden has put forward doesn't come close to covering that. So Ben said that Vice President Biden isn't interested in raising deficits. There's no way he can provide for that kind of spending without raising deficits or making up for that spending elsewhere in taxes on middle-income earners, which, of course, is what most of the rest of the world does. What Democrats have been talking about in terms of their spending plans over the course of the presidential campaign, and they've been saying that they can pay for it just taxing businesses and high-income earners. That's simply not the case. Those taxes are paid for by middle-income earners across the rest of the world in countries where we see spending burdens that are similar to what Vice President Biden is proposing in his plan.
Just to clarify, Robert said about $5.5 trillion in spending. That was the number he used. But Ben, Mattie, I want to thank you guys both for being here. This is a discussion that we will continue. Joe?
Thanks, Becky.